We are very fortunate this morning to have representatives from the College of Family Physicians here to present an overview of the Outcomes of Training report and to answer questions that you may have. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nancy Fowler, Executive Director, Academic Family Medicine, and Dr. Roy Wyman, Director, Certificates of Added Competence for the CFPC. Dr. Nancy Fowler is the Executive Director of Academic Family Medicine at the College of Family Physicians of Canada. This CFPC division oversees the development and implementation of standards of training and certification for family physicians in Canada, as well as working to advance family medicine education and research with universities and other partner organizations. She is a family physician and associate professor with 30 years of clinical and academic experience based in Hamilton, Ontario, affiliated with McMaster University, Department of Family Medicine. She has a long history of leadership in the areas of medical education and refugee health and believes strongly in family medicine as a force for good in the world. Currently, she lives in Hamilton, Ontario with her husband and spends most of her free time enjoying the company of her children and grandchildren. And Dr. Roy Wyman is a family physician who's been working in East York community of Toronto for the past 20 years, working with the Southeast Toronto Family Health Team, as well as local nursing and retirement homes. He has worked as Site Residency Director of the Enhanced Skills Program Director of Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Toronto, and as a primary care consultant for the Ontario Ministry of Health. He's also presently Director of the CACs at the CFPC, overseeing the implementation, education, and certification processes and standards related to family physicians with certificates of added competence. He has a passion for his family, photography, and being on the snow and water. So welcome.
So thank you all for having us here, and a big thank you to CAPE for inviting us to be able to talk about this project. It's a project we've been working hard on for the last many years, and is sort of coming to the beginning of the end, as our CEO likes to say, and we're really excited to share with you, and really most importantly to hear from you today, your thoughts about the project and where it's going. So the topic is the Outcomes of Training project, building a strong foundation, because that's really what we're looking at, is building this foundation of family medicine for the next 5, 10, 25 years. So what are the objectives? So our objectives today really are three. So the first one is to discuss the Outcomes of Training project, and specifically the impact that it's going to have on emergency medicine in Canada, on training in emergency medicine, and specifically enhanced skills as well, the CCFP-EM project. So that's going to be objective number one. Objective number two is going to be talking about the implementation, recognizing that, as I said, we're only at the end of the beginning. We still have a long way to go with this project. We're now starting to plan for implementation. So this is going to be a better process, but we'll discuss that with you and describe to you today what that process is going to be. And lastly, and most importantly, it's to really hear from you, hear your wisdoms, your insights, because whatever we're hearing, we're going to be taking back to our task force, our implementation task force, and hopefully be able to take this to the next steps over the next many years. So once again, conflict of interest, obviously always something that we look at. Both Dr. Fowler and Nancy and myself are employees at the CFPC, so just recognizing, obviously, as we talk about the CFPC project, we are employees there, but we truly do believe in everything we are talking about, obviously. Okay, so first of all, this room, this large room, we just sort of wanted to get a sense of everybody was here and get an idea of people's knowledge of the project as it stands. So we have three anchors here that we're looking at. So if you want to look at it, you can see where you fit. So we were initially going to do this by a poll, but I think the easiest thing for us to do is just by a show of hands. So the first one would be, I know quite a bit already, recognizing that there's a critical reflection of the training of family physicians, improving access to comprehensive care close to home. So how many people are in that first category? Show of hands? Okay, so about a third maybe. The second one would be, I know a little bit. I heard they want to increase to 3 years. It's freaking me out, but I heard about that. Okay, so we got about another third, maybe a little bit more. And then I know nothing about you. Who are you? Where am I? This is, breakfast was good this morning. Okay, so we got at least one or two. I won't point you out, obviously. Okay, so it gives us a sense of what we're talking about here, and I'm glad that we're talking more about the first two. It allows us to really get a sense of everything. Okay, short history of the building blocks. So before we get to where we were with the OTP project, it's important just really quickly to go back and explain how we got to where we are. A lot of you probably know this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but nonetheless, it's important to talk about. So if we go all the way back, remembering, of course, that family medicine, truly the training of family medicine began in the late 60s, early 70s, and soon after that, we had the establishment of the 4 principles of family medicine that anybody who's a family physician here should know that family physicians are skilled clinicians. We have we're a resource to a defined population. It's a community-based discipline, and the patient-physician relationship is tantamount, is the most important thing in family medicine. So those are the 4 principles, and really geared the training of family medicine for the next, well, up until now, but was really the seminal document, at that early stages. Soon after that became, CanMeds came out, and CanMeds was a project that began and then spread Royal College, family medicine everywhere, and really sets out the 7 roles in medicine that each physician is supposed to have, and really was the building blocks, the structure through which most residency programs were built as we were going through, and that was something that's been very important and still organizes what we do and how we determine our training. In the aughts, so about 15, 20 years ago now, we started with the CCC competency-based curriculum, or competency-based medical education. This occurred both at CFPC and also occurred at the Royal College, where it's competency by design. And this concept was the idea of figuring out what we were training to, what was our endpoint, and then making sure we were assessing appropriately to that endpoint. So it wasn't just a matter of going through and saying, you've done a month of this, month of that, month of this. It's a matter of, okay, what is it we're trying to train in? How do we get to that point? How do we make sure that our curriculum fits all of that, and that we're making sure that we are training to a competence rather than to just a time? And this is very seminal, because this is really the next step that gets us to where we are today as we're talking about moving forward with competency and with the Outcomes of Training project. The CCC part of it was the really important part from family medicine, and that was making sure that all our curricula trained to the CCC. So that was comprehensiveness, continuity in education, but also in training, and also that it was centered in family medicine. So the idea that there was family medicine involved in all of the educational components, and this was a big change that occurred over the last 15 years, started in the core programs, where there was a full redesign of all of the programs with regards to designing to the CCC, and more recently we've really been starting to focus on the enhanced skills programs, obviously emergency medicine, but the other 7 as well, to making sure that they are reaching that same level of that CCC competency-based education. And again, that competency-based part of it is going to be important as we move forward with this whole discussion. Family medicine professional profile was a big project over the last, 5 years, I guess, is when it came out at this point? 2018. And this was a document, another seminal document the CFPC put out, that stipulates the commitment of family medicine to all of Canada. It stated, this is what family docs do, this is what we commit to do for Canada, and it's a fantastic statement, worthwhile looking at if you haven't seen it in a while. It is on there, and most recently, as of the last couple of months, there is now a companion document on there that also talks about the commitment of our CAC holders, family physicians with CACs, including CCFPEM, as well to Canada, the Canadian population. So this is the building blocks. This is how we got to where we are today. So taking a step back, let's talk about emergency medicine. So what were the building blocks of emergency medicine? So as you know, I'm sure you've all seen these numbers before. I don't need to go over them in detail, but the basic gestalt of this is the majority of emergency medicine is done by family physicians in Canada. Whether it's from an urban, whether it's rural, it is done by family physicians, and we want to keep it this way. I want to state right now up front that at the end of the day, after this whole discussion of OTP and everything we're talking about, the CFPC, family medicine, is still very committed to family physicians still being involved in emergency medicine, and that includes the CCFPEM, and most importantly the CCFPEM, because they do so much of that work. This is not about changing any of that. It's about how do we evolve that? How do we evolve the process to make sure that we are doing the best we can, related back to professional profile, competency, all that type of stuff I talked about before. So I'll talk about the collaborative working group on emergency medicine. It came out in 2016. as some of you might have been involved on this working group. It was a conjoint working group of the Royal College, CFPC, and CAPE that was looking at evaluating the education in emergency medicine, evaluated what had happened before, and how things can change going forward. And this, the document came out in 2016, now already 6 years ago. But this document is in some ways the precursor. What was what's the word I'm looking for?
Impetus.
The impetus, thank you, for us to start looking at some of the stuff we're going to talk about as it relates to the OTP. So what were some of the things that came out of that? All right, so this one, for example. The CFPC is encouraged to review the rural remote findings in detail, and as many CCFP certified physicians fulfill critical ED setting needs in these settings, consider modifications to the program in order to ensure the required competencies for provision of emergency care are attained by program graduates intending to work in these settings. So one of the things that we found out, and we'll talk a bit more about this, and Nancy will talk a bit more about this, is that as residents have been going through over the last many years, there's been a decrease in what they've been doing. And part of that potentially had to do with the programs and the amount of different comprehensiveness that was in the program, the amount of opportunities. So this is one thing that came out of that, and we'll talk about how we're looking to address this. Second thing, the nature of the preceding 2 years of CCFP training should also be considered at the level of each individual, as inter-program variability exists in the nature of this, particularly regarding whether the focus is rural or urban. So again, the variability with different programs, some programs being a little better at making sure that their graduates were ready to be able to do some emergency medicine, if any, whereas others might have been better than others that were out there. So looking at some sort of consistency across the process. And lastly, a detailed review of the curriculum of CCFP training, competency-based perspectives, so making sure that we were looking at the competency-based. So I talked about that before with relation to the CCC competency-based curriculum, and looking at resulting in modifications, potentially increasing the program duration, something that we had heard from program directors off and on. But again, a recommendation that came from the CWEG. So again, these are things that were impeti, I don't know if that's a plural of impetus, but impetuses for us to be able to move forward with some of what we were doing. I'll pass it on to Nancy to talk about this last one related to the CPSO.
So yeah, coming out of the collaborative report was the need to conduct a curriculum review, and we were just gearing up to do that when there was a critical incident in Ontario that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Probably some of you in this room were involved in the rather urgent discussions that started to happen when the CPSO issued a change in scope policy, potentially prohibiting our urban grads from automatically qualifying for licenses to work in rural emergency departments. And so with that, there was that triggered a health workforce crisis in Ontario, potentially hitting rural communities that summer. And because those rural communities rely very much on our grads doing work in emergency departments and locums. And so I was part of those meetings. And it was quite, it was quite dramatic because what we heard from those small communities is that if they didn't have access to our grads to do those locums, some of them were going to have to, as one person put it, turn off the hospital sign. And I guess if that isn't emblematic of an access issue, I don't know what is. And so. The CPSO was really quite respectful and listened, and ultimately we were successful in advocating that policy be reversed. But it did start it was a wake-up call for the CFPC, and it really did elevate the need to do this curriculum review. And even in that incident, we started to learn about some very significant inconsistencies across the programs in terms of how much emergency medicine, what level of experience could you expect a resident to have? Were they truly prepared to be working in the emergency department setting? And so that really drove us to actively set up the outcomes of training project. And so that is, as Roy says, that critical incident lives large in our organizational memory. The rest of what you're going to hear about is in large part a response to this. Okay, so outcomes of training project. As a thumbnail sketch, it has been a critical review of the entirety of residency training, not only focusing on emergency medicine, along with CAC training, with the goal of looking at a variety of things. The evolving role of the family physician. So we hear from many of our members that family doctors are facing increasing both social and medical complexity in the care that they provide. Shifting societal needs, an aging population, an opioid crisis, a pandemic. There are some major forces that are shaping potentially the ways in which training needs to evolve to make sure family docs continue to be well prepared. And then, of course, as we've just spoken about, the project was set up to identify existing concerns and gaps potentially in training. So that was the why. So the project has been organized, the first phase of the project, which we're only now complete, was organized as a review of our educational requirements. So we developed 3 work streams, and the first is a relook at what we're aiming for in training. Can we come up with a consensus, a common mental map of what it is we're trying to do in training, particularly with alignment to health workforce needs? So beyond competencies, what's the work that our graduates can be expected to take up when they graduate? So that's been the development of the training profile. Here's our CEO, Francine Lemire, reminding us that although health policy types tend to talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary care, as family physicians, we orient ourselves often a little differently to that. We think about comprehensiveness and the pluripotent generalist, and we think about meeting community needs, whatever they are, and using our broad skill sets towards that. So just to say that although we are foundational in primary care, the work of family doctors and the work of family physicians with CACs in emergency medicine extends well beyond what would be traditionally considered primary care. Okay, so what does the family medicine professional profile look like? In putting the profile together, I'm not going to detail the methodology, but I'll tell you a little bit about how we did that. We sort of went back to basics, and we examined, we did some field research, and that field research involved hundreds of family doctors across the country, looking at the profiles of their practices. The scope of work, the description of work, the organization of care, and their learning trajectories. When did they learn to do the things they do? How much is critical that they learn in residency versus how much is the kind of thing you tend to learn on the fly once you're out in practice? And we use that to create the training profile, which really establishes a description of the critical threshold of what training must enable them to do in practice. And as you can see here, and those bullet points that you see is how we're defining comprehensiveness in training. So we would expect that any of our graduates would have foundational abilities, which we have called core professional activities, in all of these areas. So we're not saying that everybody coming out of our programs has mastery in these areas, but what we are saying is that we've gotten them to a safe starting line. These are all activities that they should be able to pick up and use in practice. Okay, so then the next step of the project, having defined comprehensiveness in training, the next step was to ask ourselves, together with our training programs, looking at outcomes data, how are we doing with this? Are we doing this now? And if not, what will it take to get us to the point that we're able to train to this definition of comprehensiveness? And here's some of what we learned. So we looked at our FMLS survey, which is our longitudinal resident survey that follows our graduates 3 years out into practice to look at their practice intentions compared to what they actually do in practice. We looked at CMPA and CAPER data as it relates to the changing scopes of practice of our graduates. And we conducted focus group interviews and did some qualitative work with early career graduates and expert panel groups, really to gain an understanding of what the influences are on their practice choices, and to what extent is training a factor. So here's in short order some of the key points of what we learned through that. What this work did was reinforce this idea that family medicine is more than primary care, and you've seen the scope of how we're defining that. Sorry, I've just been to the optometrist and learned that I need cataract surgery, so I'm trying to read this here. No, I just don't want to turn my back. It's okay, I can see. We've also learned that there are some pretty significant data limitations, and so there's work that we're going to need to do as an organization to build up our ability to study the outcomes of training. We've learned that the comprehensiveness of early career, the scopes of practices of our graduates is shrinking. That is multifactorial. It is not only about training. It is actually mostly about a system that doesn't necessarily support the work of family doctors to practice in that way. But it is also about training. There is a big drop-off in what our graduates say they want to be doing. Many of them want to include, in small and regional centers, want to be including emergency work as part of their training. But the majority of them aren't doing that at the 3-year post-graduation mark. And when you sort of study the why of that, they are not feeling ready to go, many of them not feeling ready to go for those roles when they leave our programs. Sorry, I'm just going to hit a few other highlights here. Yeah, so you're going to hear more about this, but we did identify some important potential training gaps in areas of emerging societal importance. You'll see that when we look at our recommendations in terms of some of those core content areas for family medicine. And when we took the residency training profile to family medicine program directors, we asked them, can you do this? Can you do this in the current training environment? Can you make these enhancements? Can you train to the scope of practice? And what we heard back from them is clearly a no. You know, they agree with, we have consensus on, you know, this is what we want to be doing. But what we heard is that training is too compressed. The curriculum is full. There is simply not enough bandwidth in our training to achieve this definition of comprehensiveness and the enhancements that we need to make. And so that's, and it shouldn't be a surprise. What I've included here is some of the work that we did doing an international jurisdictional review of both the scope and length of training in family medicine around the world. We chose to look at these 4 countries because these are the countries that we've deemed as being most comparable to the role of the family physician in Canada. So we looked at the US, the UK, Ireland, and Australia, and we looked at both the regular and the rural training pathway in Australia. And so on this slide, what you're looking at is the defined scope of training in those countries. And what you'll see, and across the top, so are the domains of practice from our training profile. So we wanted to compare scope of training. And what you can see here is that there's a lot of, every country trains for comprehensive primary care, but there's only a couple countries that do include emergency care, hospital care, and intrapartum care as a routine part of their training. And those countries are Canada, Australia, well, the Australian rural stream, that is, and the US. Probably not a big surprise because of the geographic realities of our countries with significant rural and distributed populations. And so Canada shares, along with the US and Australia, the broadest scope of training. And then on the next slide, what you'll see is the length of training in those same countries. Just focus on the column that's got the yellow arrow. That's core program length, because that controls for other differences in the training pathway. And so what we're looking at here is the specialty-specific training in family medicine and how long is that. And what you can see here is that Canada sits, of course, at 2 years, as you're well aware. Australia, regular stream 3 years, rural stream 4 years, and in the US, 3 years. But the US is actually experimenting and pushing towards 4 years of training in family medicine. So in essence, we have the broadest possible scope of training and the shortest training in the world. So we shouldn't be surprised when we hear our program directors say, we just don't have enough time to do all these things. Okay, so, oh, am I doing this? Yeah, okay. I was just like on a roll there. We just want to show you we just want to remind you of the project recommendations if you haven't had a chance to see them. And we're gonna go through them sequentially, right? Okay. So what you're looking at is the cover shot of the report of the project that came out just in January 2022, and so it was really the culmination of the work that we've done to date in reestablishing our training requirements and making the recommendations. And I'm going to emphasize that these are recommendations at this stage. What needs to happen to support the implementation of the training profile? So that's actually just the first recommendation is implement the training profile for core family medicine. That's recommendation number 1. This is where the length of training comes into play. Because what we're saying is that to enable that, we will need to move to longer 3-year training in core family medicine. I think hopefully I've given you enough of an explanation at this stage for the rationale for the 3 years. You know, what is it that we're hoping to address in the 3 years? In a competency-based training paradigm, time is a resource. Time is not a solution in and of itself. So if we just increase the length of training, but don't concern ourselves with what that training is going to look like, what's the design of that training, it might not get us anywhere. Time itself is purely a resource. And there we have it. 3 years is a resource. It's not a plan. We're only at the beginning of working with you to establish the plan for what that training should look like. And as Roy's already pointed out, we know that this is going to be a long road. This is a complex change proposition, ripple effects throughout the system. The last thing we want to do is to destabilize the healthcare system by introducing this in any kind of a hasty way. So we're going to take our time, and what we've said is that it's going to be at least 5 years of engaging with you in a change process to understand the implications and to do the work to put together the resources before the college will be changing any of its training standards. So I just really want to emphasize that point. We are now at what Francine, our CEO, calls the beginning of the middle. We've just finished establishing our training requirements. Now we're doing the planning for the implementation.
Moving forward, on to recommendation number 2, we're starting to talk more about the enhanced skills programs and the CCFP-EM obviously being a part of that. And as Nancy mentioned, you know, we've had this whole process. We did the CCC competency-based curriculum. Within that, some of you who are educators would have heard about the priority topics, which were sort of a list of the priority topics, the topics that everybody should know. And underneath there were the key features, which were the how to assess these priority topics. And these were the assessable competencies that we had. But what was always missing, and those of you who have been learning teaching for a while, will remember in the Red Book, there used to be a really long document in there that stipulated exactly what you were training to in emergency medicine. It had all the criteria, all the expectations, and a lot of programs continued to use that. But then CCC came along and we had the prototypes of key features, and there was a little bit of confusion. Okay, which one do you go with? And then we took the other one out of the Red Book. So the residency training profile is that next step. So the residency, as Nancy was saying, we did a ton of consultation. We did something called describe it to a Martian, narrate it. What do you call it? Tell it to a Martian. I always get it wrong.
It was a practice narrative. Actually, we had we said explain it to a Martian.
Explain it. I always get the term right. Explain it to a Martian, where we really went out to a lot of people, asking them, what do you think, if you were going to describe family medicine, palliative care, family medicine, emergency medicine, how would you describe what that means? What is that work? And then we took all that data, we put it together using the prototypes and key features and translating it all. That's how we came up with the residency training profile, and then we secondarily consulted on it to make sure that it fit, and that's how we ended up with this. So the residency training profile is the outcome that we're hoping to train to. Now, as Nancy said, we don't expect everybody to have mastery at that point, but at least that we know that these are the expectations. When you're going into that training, this is where we hope to get you to understand the role that you're going to play. So for the enhanced skills ones, the HCAC-related enhanced skills programs, they're relatively similar with obviously differences for each of the programs, but it's divided into two. As Nancy mentioned, there are the core professional activities, which are the activities that anybody in that domain of practice would do, and there is a narrative that describes the overarching expectations of what somebody working in that domain of practice would look like. And if you haven't taken a look at it, please do, because it's a really good summary of what we're hoping everybody with a CAC is going to be able to do as they get into practice. And some of the key areas that are in there that wasn't necessarily in the prototypes and key features are things like obviously providing advanced level of care, which is what we expect for all our CACs, but for emergency specifically, manage the ER, collaboration, obviously very important, providing leadership, which was something that was expected but now is really implicit, participating in scholarship as you can. Obviously in different provinces there's QI, which can be part of that, but scholarship as defined by the individual. Act as a community resource, really important obviously for all of the CACs to be that resource to the prep community in general, and that would sort of take us down to the idea of working as a group. And then one that we've added in, which is manage personal professional activities, self-care, those type of things as well. So this was the residency training profile as it related to the CAC enhanced skills. So recommendation number 2 was implement the residency training profile. So that is the next step. And again, we're not implementing it tomorrow. We are at the beginning of determining how we are going to implement it. And obviously it has to be in conjunction with number 1, because how we define the implementation number 1 is going to help define how we're going to be doing the training for recommendation 2. So they're going to be going hand in hand with lots of communication with all of our partner organizations as we go through this. And we've had some great conversations, well, specifically with CAPE, but with a lot of our other organizations. The other 2 things that are on there are practice eligible route, more relevant for the other 7 CACs. There already is a practice eligible route, obviously, for emergency medicine, so that exists. So that becomes less of an issue. And re-entry training opportunities. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but for those who are in practice to decide, okay, you know what, I want to go back and I actually do want to get a CAC, how do you get that? And sometimes you can do it in practice. Sometimes you're going to have to re-enter into a training program, and it is amazing the differences across the country as to how that occurs. Some provinces have it open for everybody. Some provinces are very specific about who can apply for that. So trying to determine and advocate as a college to make sure at least there's some consistency around that as we move forward. So that's recommendation number 2. So when we look at recommendation 1 and recommendation number 2, what are the impacts on enhanced skills training that we hope to expect? So these are 2 of the positive impacts, and there's more, but these are the 2 that we're just highlighting here. Obviously, with a bit of a longer time and an understanding of what we're training to with the RTP, we're hoping that everybody who enters an enhanced skills or goes into a CAC will have a broader base to be working with as we're looking to not redesign, but to evolve the training program. This does not mean the people that have been training up until now aren't great family docs. They are. This is all about how do we change it? And as Nancy mentioned, the programs are saying themselves, we don't have the time. So this is all looking at, okay, how do we change that? And how do we give that time as a resource? The second one is also a level set. We've had conversations with various programs that some of the trainees, and this comes back to the report from 2016, some of the trainees were not getting to the level that they wanted. And they were spending time at the beginning of their programs just trying to bring people up to the level that they wanted to be to even begin the training program. So we're hoping that by again, evolving the training program, that we're able to level set and bring everybody up to a level that will allow the training programs to start at a different set and not have to take that extra time that sometimes they were needing to do just to bring everybody to the same level. So what are some other impacts? And these are important ones that I want to be really clear about. The 3-year, so the idea of increasing this time to 3 years. We've heard this and we want to be really clear. This is not about all of a sudden everybody's going to do what is now our 2-year program and then just get next year to do a CAC or a focus in something. That's not the goal here. The goal here, as we talked about, is we have an idea of what the new RTP should look like, the training program, and we believe it's going to take longer. So if we believe that's going to take longer, you can't just, and the enhanced skills program is a year, it just does, the math doesn't work out, right? So we don't know what it's going to be, but it's not going to be that everybody does 2 years, they're done, and now they do a 3rd year and whatever, and we're just going to be training people to do focus practice, CACs, whatever. That's not the idea here. The corollary of that, though, is it also doesn't mean that it's going to be 3+1. It doesn't mean that it necessarily means that now to get a CAC, you're going to have to do your 3 years of family medicine core and then do another year. We don't know that. We haven't gone into that point. We still need to figure out, as I said, we're at the beginning of the implementation process, and it may be that what we look at is some sort of integrated concept, whether it's in that 3rd year there's opportunities to do some of that training that would allow you to add that to your CAC in the 3+ program. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to be 4 years to get a CCFP and the CAC. It might be. Some programs might decide, yeah, we do need all that time. We've always felt that it should be longer than a year, and now we feel it's going to be 3+. That's all up for discussion. That's going to be part of all the task force and the implementation, the discussion, and the back and forth that we're going to be doing over the next at least 5 years, if not more, as we work towards that. But this is going to be a collaborative, iterative process as we figure it out. And as I mentioned before, this is going to be part of the competency-based education. We've all been talking about CBME or CBD, Competency by Design at the Royal College, and this concept of it's not only time-based. Time is the resource. It's not where you need to get to. It's all about making sure you have the competency. Now that requires excellent evaluative processes and assessment to make sure that you know the person has reached that level. But it might be that you end up being a bit more flexible with it and feeling, you know what, somebody does have that level and they have reached that in X amount of time. Somebody needs Y amount of time. And these are the things that we really want to be able to get to. Now, granted, a lot of this stuff is sometimes related to funding and other external resources, but ideally, in a competency-based design, this is what you'd be looking at. Opportunities, again, the competency-based education, so I think that this really helps us to move forward to that competency-based concept and innovative integration models. We've talked to some of our partner organizations, and there's lots of great ideas out there about how we set this up, whether it's integrated, whether, like I could go on about some of the different ideas, whether it's, people go out and work and then come back. So these are all the things that we're going to be looking at. But there is that opportunity to think about some integrated models and ideas. So where does this all fit in? Coming back to the report in 2016, again, ensuring the required competencies, so that's one of the things we're looking at is, again, raising that level, raising that set standard, so that's the first thing that we're hoping to do. And the incorporation of competency-based perspective might extend the training, expand the training. So these are two of the recommendations that we're hoping with the Outcomes of Training Project. With these recommendations, we're going to be able to address some of these issues that came up back in 2016. So Nancy, I'll pass it on to you for a discussion about the
Thanks, yeah, so,
next step.
and I think we're almost at the end of the slide, so we'll be able to sort of turn the conversation over to you. What comes next, and how are we going to structure that implementation planning that Roy referred to? So this slide is a bit of a combination of a timeline and to give an idea of some of the structures that are being put into place to get at that work. So what you'll see on the timeline is that the recommendations came out this past January. And as I mentioned earlier, we are giving ourselves a minimum period of 5 years to work with all of our partner organizations and groups to come up with a good implementation plan. We will not be changing our standards of certification or our standards of accreditation until we are confident that a good plan is in place. And so, might it be longer than 5 years? Well, maybe. That's going to be a bit of an iterative process according to, how that implementation planning is going, and what we learn are the key issues. So we will stay open and flexible to what that timeline needs to be, but it will not be before 2027. So I think that's just, I guess I just want to turn the temperature down a little bit on this, and to make sure that we're signaling to you that we want to do this in a good way. And when I say that, I'm talking about two main streams of work that need to happen around implementation. One is the educational work. Like, what will a new era program look like? What's a good design to get to where we want to be? Many of you are educational experts for emergency medicine. We need to connect with you on that. The other stream of work is going to be more the health workforce planning and resource and capacity issues. So we know now that we can't have a gap year where there's no grads in either core family medicine or in emergency medicine. We know that that can't happen. So how can this be phased in a way that does not destabilize the system? We need to work together with the Royal College, and we are working together with the Royal College. We have something called the Intercollegiate Advisory Group, where we're starting to look at, how the changes that we're making in family medicine relate to the Royal College programs. We are, again, not looking to destabilize or displace or compete with the Royal College. We enjoy a collaborative relationship, and we envision a whole continuum of training, core family medicine, CAC-related training, and Royal College training as overlapping and complementary scopes of practice that really put the necessary competencies into the system in a way that aligns with health workforce realities. That's what we're aiming for, and those will be some of our key partners. So how we're proposing to do that, we've established a task force. So you're looking at a little bit of an outline of what the task force is going to be doing. We've established a task force that meets for the first time in June. And the task force will be not the worker bees, but the guidance group. So the task force has a broad membership that will help us to connect with our stakeholder groups, our partner organizations, and which is where much of the work will be happening. And so the task force, and we actually just had a really good conversation. I don't know if Amy will be saying more about this, but we had a very good conversation at breakfast this morning with the CAPE leadership, talking about how we can work together, and the idea of CAPE forming a working group that would that would be formally linked to the task force to look at both the educational design part and the health workforce planning that needs to happen to do this in a good way. So that would be an example of how the task force will function. We will be striking various types of working groups, advisory groups, and they will input to the task force so that, but we do have a place where that comes together. So this is just kind of a little bit of a hard to follow outline here, but if you start from the left, you can see just the types of things that the task force will be looking at, and the types of activities that they'll be commissioning and integrating. And then on the far right, you can see these were our, in terms of who's on the task force, these were our various considerations. So we wanted a spectrum of folks from different leadership roles and key stakeholders. So we've got program directors, enhanced skill program directors, emergency medicine program directors, family medicine program directors, post-grad dean. Those are some of those people in the leadership category. We've got people that are there because of their specific skill attributes. So we do have, I mean, a lot of this work is also about bringing about, anti-racist practices and cultural safety. So we do have some EDI, educational experts on the task force. From a social accountability perspective, we have engaged the SRPC to make sure that we've got an adequate rural lens on the work. And you can see some of the other members there, including a member of our Indigenous Health Committee, et cetera. So that just gives you a sense of who's on the task force. So that's how the work is going to unfold. There will be key junctures where we do the environmental scanning and say, are we on track with this? Are we on track with this? Can we do this still starting in 2027? Yes, great. No, okay. Slow it down. What's got to happen? So I just really want to emphasize the flexibility and the responsive nature of what we're proposing. One of the last things I think we want to emphasize is that we are well aware at the college that the healthcare system is in rough shape. And we're hearing this from family docs everywhere. They're really struggling. They're really struggling to be valued, respected, supported in their work. And a lot of people are burnt out. A lot of people dropping out of clinical care altogether. And so we know that these educational changes are coming at a difficult time, and yet kind of at a critical time as we look to make change. These educational changes are not the silver bullet for everything that's wrong in the healthcare system, by no means. We do think that some of the educational changes we're making will help to support health system transformation, and that's what we're aiming for. This slide's here just to indicate to you, though, that the college has also got a lot of other work that's gearing up around health system transformation and adoption of what we call the patient's medical home, which is that that structure that helps to support family doctors in team-based practices. Yeah.
All right, so we're down to the last few slides, and then we'll open it up and allow people to make comments or questions. Just as we mentioned, there are 4 recommendations that came out, so I'm just going to really quickly go over the last 2 recommendations just to highlight them so we're obviously be complete. So number 3, and this is really important, one of the things we really early found on is that the databases just aren't there. We don't have great measurements and data to be able to determine what's happening out there. There's no consistency with that. So one of the big parts of this project that is like an overarching, totally parallel side to this is really making sure that we're able to set up those evaluative processes and determining how we collect that data. So that's going to be an important side of this that we need to get done. Otherwise, how do we know what we're doing, and how do we know whether we're accomplishing what we want to accomplish? So that was recommendation number 3. Recommendation number 4, the other thing that obviously happens with medicine, and we're all seeing this, is it changes. For emergency medicine, nobody was doing ultrasound 20 years ago, now everybody's doing it, right? So that'd be a perfect example of things that have to adapt. And as we went through, there were obviously certain areas that there just wasn't enough training in there. And you could see it in the data that a lot of the programs just were not getting enough in these areas that we identified. So home and long-term care, addiction and mental health, indigenous health, cultural safety and trauma-informed care, virtual care and informatics. So these are areas that we're really looking to implement again over the next however many years, 5 years, making sure that we are getting these into programs. Part of the reason why we think there needs to be that extension, because there just isn't the space in the 2 years that are there right now. In addition to this, though, and it's important to mention, it's not just about what we've identified with our data so far, it's also about how do we identify the ones going forward. So that's something we're also going to need to look at is, okay, this might be for the next 5 years. What about the 5 years after that? We're not going to go through this whole process again. How do we determine what are these new and upcoming areas that we're going to have to integrate into the programs? So those are the 4 recommendations as they stand. Again, the website is there. If you want, you can look it up on the CFPC website, but it's the full report is there. So how do we measure success? And a lot of these relate to the first recommendation, but it's the large question. So these are just some of the measurements that we're going to be looking at. Obviously, going back to recommendation number 3, how do we collect that data? But increase the ability of programs to be able to implement the RTP. So the residency training profile, we've developed it. making sure the programs have the ability to implement it. Increased preparedness. So one of the things we looked at is not just competency, but confidence. You know, the residents are leaving having that confidence. Interesting conversation I had with a Royal College colleague of mine the other day, talking about the training he's involved with, where he finds the first 2 years are sort of, you know, getting to baseline. Third year is all about consolidation, and I think that's probably what we're looking at as well, is making sure we get that consolidation here so people leave not just competent, but confident, as much as anybody can be confident. I think we could agree with that. Increased percentage of residents considering broader-based practice. Again, not just a training issue, also about how you change the system to allow individuals to train to that. Enhance the value of family physicians and interest. So this, I think, is the long-term goal. Remember, we talked about the long view. This might not be 2 years, might not be 5 years, maybe this 10 to 15 years. Really making sure that people understand this is what you're going into family medicine for. These are the expectations, and they're going in with that excitement of wanting to do it. Improved distribution to rural small-town practice, hopefully with people having that more confidence, they're able to consider doing that, and improve cultural safety and effectiveness of care so people feel that, again, that confidence to take care of things and to be able to do what they need to do. So these are just some of the measures. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more, but some of them that we're looking at. So what are people excited about? Well, increased horizon of opportunity, so a career worth having, the idea of what family medicine is, the full concept of what we're trying to do, and that's what we're trying to define here. It's been there, but we're just making it clearer and trying to be really overt about what exactly we're thinking family medicine is, and the CACs as well, and where they fit into our system in general. Time is a resource. We've said it before, we're going to say it again. In a competency-based curriculum, time is not the, okay, month here, month here, month here. It is the idea of having that opportunity to be able to do what you want to do and need to do to implement what we believe needs to be done. It allows for the innovation that we're hoping will occur. Enhanced readiness to enter enhanced skills. So again, talked about that before, the people, that level set. Better supported transition into practice. Some of the ideas people have had, again, is, maybe you write your exam after second year, the third year is all about consolidation and being able to get ready for that transition. Just one idea that's out there. Again, improved remuneration. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but there's definitely something we've heard about. Now, if there's such, if there's that closer amount, does remuneration become something that's discussed? And again, the question about the hidden curriculum. I don't need to say more about that. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. So what are people worried about? And we hear a lot about this, and I'm sure there might be some other ones we want to bring up today, but these are definitely the ones that we're hearing a lot about. Decreased interest in family medicine. Maybe people are just going in because it's the shortest and they're able to get out. I'm not sure that necessarily holds true. Like if we're just going to keep it at 2 years because we want people to go in because it's the shortest, I'm not really sure that really works out in my mind, but I'm happy to hear if people have other thoughts about that. Loss of graduates for a year, big concern in emergency medicine that we're hearing about. If you don't get graduates coming out for that year, what is going to be the impact on locums, on being able to find people? So that is something we're going to have to be looking at. Idea of salary, people are going, okay, if I can do 3 years or 3+1 or do a 5-year and the salary is going to be that much different, really why would I choose that? So something we're going to have to look at. Will there be support? Are the provinces going to be willing to do this? And this is part of the advocacy part that we're going to need to look at as we go through this. And it was a chicken and egg process. Like, do we make this recommendation and then get the payers, or do we go to the payers saying we want this and wait before we say 3 years? So we've chosen to make the bold statement, no, we think there needs to be more. Now we need to be able to try and find that funding to be able to do that. And we think there's a really good economic model out there for that, but this is definitely something that we're working at. Training resources, we hear this a lot from the programs, thinking, okay, you're going to increase my training, my residents by 50%, well, whatever, you know what I mean, third, over that 3 years. Where am I going to find the places to train them? And there's lots of answers to that, and we're going to be looking at that. One of them might be that all of a sudden you have these senior residents. Are they a value added beyond, as an educational resource, beyond just being somebody that needs to be trained? And one of the other things we talked about is, why not change the work opportunities first? Why not change, if people are going into comprehensive, we talked about how it's multifactorial, let's change the other factors and then look at training last. And we sort of felt like, okay, we got to do both at the same time. Just changing that's a really large, long-term process. We believe that both need to be done, and that's part of the reason. But these are just some of them. I'm sure there's more that you might be able to talk about as we talk today. So last slide I'm going to put up for now. Again, we want to hear your comments, we want to hear your ideas, but these are 3 of the questions that at least we wanted to present, either for today, or if you want to email Nancy or myself, we're happy to bring them back. But how should enhanced skills training in emergency medicine evolve as we move to 3 years of core training? What are some ideas you have out there? I've spoken to some of the program directors. I've had some really great ideas from some of the emergency medicine program directors so far. We had a conversation this morning. Some other ones are coming up. Anything else you might have either today or going forward, please share them with us. This is something that we will be doing over the next 5 years. Part of the task force will have this. There's going to be an enhanced skills subsection to this. So we're going to be looking at how to integrate all of this. And it might not be one idea across the country. It might be that there's different ideas that people are looking at. At the end of the day, it's going to be training to the RTP to allow people to be eligible for the CAC. What do we need to consider as we look at the curricular design of core training? So as it relates to emergency medicine, how do we establish that? How do we change? How do we get to the point of what we want in that core RTP? Where you can see the emergency medicine takes a large component of that. And again, if you read through the document, you'll see what the expectations are. How do we make sure we're getting to that? And we're going to need all of you to be able to make sure we are getting to that. And I think with the, as Nancy was saying, the CAPE committee that's going to be helping with that will be very helpful. And having that ongoing communication will be something we look at. And lastly, and I alluded to this, what challenges have we not considered? What else do we need to be thinking about? We obviously couldn't talk about everything today, but we want to hear anything you might have. And that's sort of at the point where we are now getting the microphones out there for any questions you might have. Nancy, anything you want to say before that?
No, thanks, Roy. I think
Okay.
it's time to hear from you now. Oh, actually, I believe Amy's going to come up and at the end. Okay, yeah, sorry. So we are opening the mic. Oh, you need no encouragement.
Jock, I think that's you.
Yeah, Jock Murray from Halifax. Thank you very much, Roy and Nancy. I agree philosophically with the move to the 3-year program, but you addressed some of the big problems just at the end there. That, that year where there's a cohort of no family doctors graduating is very problematic given the shortages we have right now. And I really don't see an easy answer to that. The other big question would be, where are the payers in this? I didn't, in that oversight, I didn't see any of the people who are paying for residency in that. And is the plan to go to them afterwards, or where do they fit into all this?
Sorry, John.
The payers, the provinces.
Funders? Yeah, the provinces. So yeah, I don't mean to respond as if I've got sort of simple answers for all these things, but I will say a few things. The question of the funders critical. In each province, it looks a little bit different in terms of, what are the tables and who are the players in, who comes together with the provinces to make those decisions. And so to a certain extent, I think we're not going to be able to take a one-size-fits-all approach. We recognize that we're going to have to engage the deans and the vice deans in some of this work. They are the university folks that are at those provincial tables. But having said that, I think there is a little bit more work to be done on the educational modeling side before we can actually do the financial modeling piece of it, if you know what I mean. So it's a little bit of a dance right now. We need to get far enough ahead that we would have a sense of, okay, what's the shape of training? And with that, do the business case. So we have hired, no, I'm going to take that back. We are meeting with a health economist who's done similar type work with the Royal College. We're meeting with that individual in the next week to start to think about how we can try to put that business case together. So on the issue, there's a big long line. I'm going to come back to the other issue. We'll see what other people have to say, but some of the possibilities for kind of a staggered introduction and what that could look like to avoid the gap year. So,
I probably don't have very original comments, but one of the worries I have is places in the emergency room. So if we want to create physicians that are more ready to go work in emergency rooms, they're going to need to have more exposure, so more shifts in the ER for sure. But the problem is we're already fighting for places for clerks and everything else. And so will there be like a choice to maybe not do any ER at all if someone knows they're not going to go rural and they're not going to work in an ER, so that we clear up some space? Or are we going to have to go and send our residents to like very rural rotations for ER and add some like displacement for them out of their families and such? So I think that's one where we need to think about in advance. The other thing I want to point out is that in the past, I've wanted to add like a trauma simulation for our family medicine residents, and I was told, well, this is not in the objectives and the program's already full, so we can't put it in. So when you're going to be thinking about the objectives, please take into account the epidemiology in Canada. Like, the main reason why people die in certain age groups are trauma and toxicology, and so I think this needs to be included in the objectives. They're not like fancy, weird things. They're just very common and very important. So maybe just take this in account when you're going to plan the actual new program. And the last thing is a question. It's a true question. I think I have a solely ER practice, and I'm very happy with not having a broad practice. And I have some friends who do only like primary care in their office, and I think they're doing a great job. And I don't know why we're always pushing so much for a broad practice. I felt a lot of pressure for that in my residency and still now from the government of Quebec. And they do as well. And so I wanted to know if there is like any evidence, like why are we pushing for that? Is it because of health benefits for patients, or why?
Okay. I'm going to start with that last one, if you don't mind, partly because I'll be able to remember it, and then maybe we can comment on some of the others. So comprehensiveness and comprehensiveness in practice is one of the features, which is kind of a well-established kind of point of evidence. It is one of the features of high-functioning systems of primary health care. So the idea that most of what presents in the healthcare system as first contact care can be handled within the primary healthcare system. Now, that is not to say that, so I want to also be clear when I say that we do not think that comprehensiveness is something that one individual person achieves on their own. We don't expect that every family doctor is doing everything on that list all the time, for all of their patients. We do want them to have that comprehensiveness in training, and so the foundational abilities are there for them to be able to pick up the combination of skills and services that they're offering, according to a community's need. But we're not thinking that everybody does everything. We accomplish comprehensiveness in practice in teams. But comprehensiveness is a well-established feature of a high-functioning system, so that is critical. I'll maybe comment on one other thing that you said, which is, and this is where I'm hoping that, as CAPE forms a working group that we work with, some of those other those really important educational questions and points that you made can get worked through. So in terms of capacity, I think we're going to have to look at, distributed medical education and a good alignment of where people are doing their learning compared with where they're going to be implementing those skills. So I think this is where rural training and making sure that we're attending to the capacity for rural and small kind of regional site training for core family medicine is going to be important.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, just again, to be clear, this is about training we're talking about. This is not about, nobody should feel guilty or upset about what they do. Like, people that have CACs and work and focus, great. Like, that's not a problem. And people that choose not to do, don't do that, like, that's fine. That's not the point here. The point is making sure that we are training to a level that we feel everybody should at least have as a baseline, and then people are going to choose what they're going to do in practice. So I want to be really clear about that. As to the first point, with regards to the ability to train and how you fit people in and all that type of stuff, The process we're talking about here is going to be very university-based. Like as we're talking about the implementation task force, or the education task force, it's going to be done in university-based work groups. So each university is going to be looking at their resources, and as a group, as that group trying to figure out how they're going to do it, but with the support of the college to be able to come up with ideas and work all together so that everybody can get ideas from each other. But we're not going to be looking at every university and saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. The concept is that this is the RTP, and we're going to help everybody get to that, to where they need to get to, but it's going to be really developed by each university itself. So just to be clear about that. We'll just keep going with the questions. Next question.
So I'm Yogi Sehgal. I'm an emerge doc in Fredericton, New Brunswick, but I've worked 10 years in rural medicine in Northern Ontario and other places. I want to comment on the fact that we teach in residency and med school. The most important skill we teach is self-evaluation and to understand what your gaps in knowledge are. And I think that's not just in family medicine or emerge or it's every residency. It's what are your gaps in knowledge, and to be able to address those is really important. And I think painting all of the programs as being the same is a little bit, a 2-year program in Toronto is different than a 2-year program in rural BC or Nawsum or Newfoundland. They're completely different entities. So to say that somebody who comes out who feels they just need a couple of months in obstetrics needs to do a whole year, I think is a little bit of a waste of my taxpayers' money, honestly. And I think rather than making it a requirement, would it not make more sense for it to be a resource that right now I know you can do this, but it's very limited as a resource right now. But engaging communities to say, well, if this person's going to be doing inner city medicine in Toronto, it's a waste of time to do a whole year of obstetrics and emerge and ICU and all that kind of care. And if this person is doing, I don't know, is going to work in Sioux Lookout where I used to work, and they want to do obstetrics, well, they could do 3 months of obstetrics, and that's it. That's all they need. They don't need a whole year of extra training to do that. And if they want to do emerge, then they do the extra year of emerge or whatever they're going to do. But having it as a resource rather than a requirement, to me, would be more efficient use of the funding. It would be less dilution of the training, which is a very important problem, because in 2 years, the extra 50% of work that you're going to do in the 3rd year is just taking out from the first 2 years that you were going to learn in the first place, potentially. So, I would consider it, don't paint every resident with the same brush and don't paint every residency program with the same brush, and you leave it as a resource rather than a requirement would be my suggestion.
It's an excellent, honestly, as a, more purely as an educator, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And it is actually a model that we looked at when we met with the residency program directors. And so I'll try to offer some of the rationale for why we haven't approached it that way. I think it was a combination of things. One, I think, while the consolidation skills that every resident might want would be individual, I think the fact remains that most residents feel the need to do a little more in at least a couple of areas, according to their own practice interests and according to the needs of the community that they, maybe if they know where they're going. So that's one thing. Most residents express the need to consolidate skills in at least 1 or 2 areas. The second thing is that there are some across-the-board enhancements that we're looking at that is in addition to, that represents the evolution of training. And so, in those areas of home and long-term care, addiction and mental health, cultural safety and anti-racist practice, those are things that everybody needs. And that we know now are not really happening, are not really in the curriculum currently. And so there are some across-the-board changes that need to happen. And finally, the other thing, and this is a very practical consideration that we heard from the program directors, and that is that degree of customization, while it's absolutely perfectly in keeping with a competency-based paradigm, that degree of customization is administratively very intensive and difficult to pull off, and it's hard to square it with the sorts of service commitments that you have to make in running a residency program, so that the services that do teach but also rely on residents and know that those residents are coming typically need to be made, those commitments need to be made sort of like a year in advance. So it's just actually practically difficult to achieve that level of fluidity in the program. So those are some of the reasons, but I hear you, and as an educator, I think I would have said that was my starting point in thinking about it as well, but there have been some other sort of discussions that have taken place.
Apologize for those that are still in line, but we do need to put a hold on questions just out of respect for our next speaker. So my name is Amy Kernick. I am the CAPE President-elect, and just wanted to say a few words on behalf of the CAPE Board. So firstly, thank you to Dr. Fowler and Dr. Wyman for presenting on the College of Family Physicians Outcomes of Training project. The CAPE Board believed that it was important to invite them to give an initial briefing to our members, and we appreciate them making the journey here to do so. Although CAPE was not part of the initial consultation which led to the report, we are committed to collaborating with the college moving forward in order to represent emergency medicine perspectives in the project's implementation. CAPE hopes to be involved in 3 main areas: in support of excellence in emergency care across Canada, as partners in program design involving emergency medicine competency, and to assist in highlighting the potential impacts on emergency medicine, such as workforce planning, preceptor capacity, and resident wellness. As next steps, we have established a CAPE working group on the CFPC Outcomes of Training project as an avenue for ongoing collaboration with the college. We look forward to hearing more from our members about your questions, your ideas, and your concerns, and we'll be in touch very soon with methods for engagement. So thank you to Dr. Fowler and Dr. Wyman.
And feel free, if there's still questions you want to come and talk to us, please feel free afterwards.
Thank you again, Dr. Wyman and Dr. Fowler, for coming to this meeting to make this presentation and answer questions. We have a couple of minutes before this morning's plenary starts, so in hopes that there's a few more people on their way, maybe we'll give a break for a few minutes for people to grab a coffee, and then we will start at 9:30.